Hi, Mark Gilbert here. Thanks for clicking in. This video is entitled, What's Really Real? What's Really Real? And like all the videos here, they're designed to give us some tools and ideas for assisting with our spiritual evolution. I bet there's a lot of you that when you hear the question, what's really real, you think it's a crazy question. Because we live in this world of form, this material universe where we have duties and assignments and things we have to accomplish in order to get by. There is a very persistent reality that is out there that we are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And so to ask what's really real seems crazy because all of this is really real, right? Well, it depends. And a lot of how you answer the question of what's really real is more a product of your worldview and your own ideas about how the universe is put together in your role and place in the universe. When facing the question of what's really real, most people fall into one of three camps. The first one is what is called the Materialist Camp. It's those people who feel that only matter is real, only this physical material universe is real. And in fact, consciousness is simply a byproduct of our brains. And it's one that perhaps was developed for an evolutionary purpose to allow us to be more fit for survival and propagating of the species. Although it's not quite clear how consciousness assists in that, there's a lot of people who still feel that is the reason that we have this conscious experience. It doesn't have any greater meaning than that. To quote the words roughly of the scientist Daniel Dennett, he basically says that our ability to think is no different than our ability to digest food. It's simply something that arose through the evolutionary process and gives us some sort of advantage. So you may feel that there is only physical reality. And if that's the case, then you would be in this materialistic camp. However, a lot of people recognize that in addition to physical matter, there's also thoughts. There's also the inner awareness that we have that recognizes that we're more than just these physical beings, that there is something else to us. And so these people tend to say there's two types of reality. There is an inner reality, a spiritual reality, a consciousness reality, and there's an outer world reality, a physical or matter reality. Of course, the great question that arises when we look at it from this, what's called a dualistic perspective, is where does consciousness and the world of the non-physical interact with the world of the physical? How is it that we, as these physical beings walking around, have conscious awareness? Where is the interplay between our consciousness and these physical forms? This question is called the hard problem. And it's one that no matter what scientists want to tell you, there is really no good answer for it. People like to point at the fact that we can do brain scans and that they show brain activity that correlates with certain emotional states or certain thoughts, that you can see a certain patterns of neurons firing in the brain that correlates to certain cognitive or inner states. And they want to use that as physical evidence that the brain is giving rise to the sense of consciousness. However, in that correlation, there is no description of how that causes it. There is no good explanation that's been presented by the materialists to designate how does brain activity give rise to the sense of consciousness. Hence, we're back to the hard problem that the dualists are continuously facing. And that brings us to the third group. The third group is what is called idealist. They're the ones who basically say this world of form that we're moving through is really an illusion, and the only thing that's real is our conscious awareness, our inner thoughts, the non-physical realm. Interestingly, it's many mystics who have had inner experiences, as well as certain philosophers, and more, a lot of scientists who are pointing to the fact that perhaps this physical reality is truly an illusion. Many spiritual practices lead to that sort of conclusion that the inner awareness and the inner growth is what's real and the physical world is not really real. However, we go back to a quote that's attributed to Einstein where he famously said that reality is an illusion, albeit a very persistent one. And I think we'd all have to agree with that. That is, that no matter how much we may feel that the outer world is an illusion, it certainly protrudes into our day-to-day affairs and causes us to have to interact with it. Interestingly enough, in this past year, there was an article in the Scientific American that was entitled, "Physicists are starting to suspect physical reality is an illusion." And in that article, it goes into some descriptions as to why material scientists, physicists, are beginning to believe that. So the point is, there are these three camps: materialism, dualism, and idealism. And at some point along our spiritual evolutionary path, we start looking at this question of what's really real and why do we fall into one of these particular categories. What is it that we tend to believe that makes us think that matter's real, consciousness is real, or there's a duality that involves both of them? As we develop and grow along the spiritual evolutionary path, this question of what's really real becomes more and more central to our understanding of the universe and our place in it. You might ask, why is it that we eventually face this question? You know, I was contemplating this and several thoughts came up for me why I think it is a common practice that we eventually have to face the question of what's really real. You know, we can look at this from sort of an integral standpoint. Integral standpoint says there's an outer reality and there's an inner reality, and we have to develop both and explore both. So it acknowledges that there is this interplay between the two. But also within the concept of integral consciousness or integral development, there are our lines of development. There are areas where we are growing and evolving to higher stages. And if we can look at it from our cognitive development, that is thoughts and rational application of thoughts and science and rational means, at a certain point we start to wonder, what is the meaning of life and how is the interaction between the physical and the non-physical? It becomes a natural question that is pursued just simply at the higher levels of cognitive thought and cognitive questioning. Similarly, as we grow along our spiritual line of development and we go to practices that take us inside, we begin to have this higher levels of spiritual awareness that recognizes that there is more to the universe in the world of physical form, and that naturally leads us to the question of how does the world of the physical interact with this developmental spiritual world that I am growing in? So we can see from an integral standpoint that it looks at life from an inner and outer standpoint already based on quadrants. But as our lines of development grow, as we get to the higher levels or higher stages of development in certain types of intelligences, we just naturally start looking at the question of what's really real. Another model that we could use would be the model of Maslow's hierarchy, where we talk about human needs, and as we move through developing and meeting base needs of physical needs and safety and security and loving belongingness and self-esteem, and we move into the higher level needs of self-actualization and self-transcendence. At those higher stages, as we develop up the needs level to the higher level of needs, those needs in and of themselves, that is the sense of self-actualizing, becoming all that we can be as a person, and self-transcendence, what it is like to transcend this form, this physical form, to something greater and grander beyond it, just naturally leads us to asking questions of deeper meaning and what's really real. And one other model that we could look at is the model of spiral dynamics. I've got a separate video out there on spiral dynamics as well as Maslow and integral, but the spiral dynamics model has us develop through a pattern of worldviews. And as we get to the higher worldviews, some of the interesting characteristics that emerge is that at the higher levels of development, we begin to see a state of bringing together science and spirituality, a melding of the two. And there is a natural development at the higher stages of the spiral dynamics model where we begin to ask deeper and bigger questions of meaning. So, bottom line is, no matter what of these roadmaps or models we wish to look at, there is a natural path to being a spiritual being, a human being, that takes us at the higher levels of our development to begin asking deeper and bigger questions. Why are we here? What is my role in the universe? What is the purpose of life? And ultimately behind all of that is the question of what is really real. So what I'd like to do now is to take this question of what is really real and look at it from the perspective of three different viewpoints. The first is from the writings of existential metapsychiatrist Thomas Hora. Thomas Hora wrote and practiced in the late 20th century, and one of the questions that he continuously asked in his work is, what is really real? When a person was faced with an individual challenge in their life, he would have them go back to and explore that topic of ultimate reality and what is really real. So what I'd like to do now is read you a few quotes from his book, Dialogues in Metapsychiatry. In this particular quote, Hora writes about the difference between religion and reality. He says, "It is important to know the difference between religion and reality. We can live on the basis of obedience to a divine authority, or a system of ethics, or a system of intimidation. Or we can live on the basis of understanding what really is." And that is the difference between being religious and being enlightened. What he is saying there is that being religious is following the dogma of a particular religious faith, the rules and ethics that they point out. But it's only when we tap into what's really real and the ultimate nature of reality do we approach a state of being enlightened. Here's another quote from Hora I'd like to share. He writes, "When a child is born, he has to learn first how to live in unreality. For this, he needs to be educated experientially until his education will result in a crisis or more crises. And then he'll want to be liberated from his education and discover reality. Reality which is not experiential, but which is knowing the good of God." Now, when we understand that life is entirely apart from the world of experiences, we begin to lose interest in most of the things our friends and enemies are interested in. And that is called ascension. We are rising higher and higher in consciousness and gradually losing interest in many, many things which used to be important to us. Things like compliments, praise, status, fame, power, possessions, and all sorts of things. Real life is ultimately separate from the world of dreams, which is called experiencing. When we wake up in the morning after 8 hours of dreaming, there is a separation between that state of consciousness and the awakened one. Anyone can see that when a dreamer wakes up in the morning, he leaves his dreams behind. He doesn't concern himself anymore with what he was dreaming about as he starts his day. There seems to be some difference between night dreaming and daytime experiencing. Similarly, there is a difference, a significant difference, between experiential living and the discovery of real life. It's as if we had awakened again. The Bible tells us to awake and realize the Christ consciousness that will illumine our life. What is this Christ consciousness? It is the knowledge that life is God. A couple of key points that Hora is talking about there is that we, and in this world of experiencing, is the non-reality. In a sense, it's like a dream. And it's only when we wake up from this dream of this experiencing that we touch into the goodness of God and touch the real reality. And when we do so, it's ascension, it's enlightenment, it's moving beyond the things that used to concern us, the trivial and petty things of life itself, this physical life. And here's one more quote from Hora. He says, "A very unenlightened individual has a very limited awareness of reality. Most of his awareness is absorbed in feelings and sensations. He is inclined to be concretistic. He thinks in concrete terms. On a somewhat higher level, man has the faculty of abstract thinking. He's aware of ideas and appreciates them. An artist has expanded his ability to see into spheres of aesthetic appreciation, which is neither concrete nor abstract. He can perceive beauty, harmony, color, form, order, joy, love, and meaning. The supreme faculty is the enlightened man's ability to behold reality, which is spiritual, suprasensory, transcendent. Then he can find God manifesting in himself as man. So the supreme attainment for man is to be a beholder, a fully conscious manifestation of God's being. He goes on to write, the spiritual is not superior. It is just more real. There is no hierarchy of values between the spiritual and the material. There is just reality and illusion. Illusion is very painful and difficult, full of trouble. Reality is harmonious and all good, frictionless. Jesus said, in the world ye shall have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. It's obvious in the readings of Hora that he believes that what's really real is the world of God, the world of the non-material, the world of goodness, the transcendent world. What I'd like to do now is move on to a second source and see what it says about what is real. In this case, I'm going to be using the metaphysical text, which many people are familiar with, which is A Course in Miracles. Now, A Course in Miracles begins with the words, nothing real can be threatened, nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. These words are very famous, and for those who have studied the Course in Miracles, they know that in that very beginning phrase, it is summing up the essence of the Course itself, that all of the pages and pages of text and all of the workbook and teacher's manual and all of the stuff that surrounds A Course in Miracles is to expand upon those words. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. What is that actually saying? Well, let me read a few lines from the preface to A Course in Miracles, which I think will give you a greater sense of that. It writes, this is how A Course in Miracles begins. It makes a fundamental distinction between the real and the unreal, between knowledge and perception. Knowledge is truth, under one law, the law of love or God. Truth is unalterable, eternal, and unambiguous. It can be unrecognized, but it cannot be changed. It applies to everything that God created, and only what He created is real. It is beyond learning because it is beyond time and process. It has no opposite, no beginning, and no end. It merely is. The world of perception, on the other hand, is the world of time, of change, of beginnings and endings. It's based on interpretation, not on facts. It's the world of birth and death, founded on the belief in scarcity, loss, separation, and death. It's learned rather than given, selective in its perceptual emphases, unstable in its functioning, and inaccurate in its interpretations. From knowledge and perception, respectively, two distinct thought systems arrive which are opposite in every respect. In the realm of knowledge, no thoughts exist apart from God, because God and His creation share one will. The world of perception, however, is made by the belief in opposites and separate wills, in perpetual conflict with each other and with God. What perception sees and hears appears to be real because it permits into awareness only what conforms to the wishes of the perceiver. This leads to a world of illusions, a world which needs constant defense, precisely because it's not real. When you have been caught in the world of perception, you are caught in a dream. The entire Course in Miracles is expanding upon this fact that the true reality, what's ultimately real, is beyond the world of form, and that this world of form is simply an illusion. This sense of separation and this sense of differences and this sense of competition that we experience and our ego's desire to be successful, etc. in life and to accumulate wealth and power, the political arguments that are occurring in today's life, all of this ultimately is a great and grand illusion. It's an illusion that we need to learn to transcend, and it's only through spiritual practices and personal development that we begin to understand that the greater reality and what is really real in our lives is an inner awareness, an inner growth, and in that is the goodness and givingness of the divine flow within us. Finally, the third source that I'd like to look at in this exploration of what is really real is the work of Ernest Holmes and the Science of Mind. As those of you may know from watching my videos, I am a Science of Mind minister and have been trained in this particular philosophy, so ultimately it's of great importance to me and one that I go back to frequently in my spiritual explorations. So, what does Holmes say about what's really real? You know, a cursory look at the work of Holmes would tend to say that he is a dualist because he has his teaching symbol in the back of the Science of Mind textbook. The teaching symbol is a circle that divides the essence of the divine or God into three characteristics, which he calls spirit, soul, and body. The very bottom aspect of the teaching symbol recognizes that God, or the infinite universe, has within it a characteristic that's called body, or the world of the manifest form. Hence, that tends to imply that there is a dualism between the world of non-form, i.e. spirit, soul, and the world of form, body. However, I want to dig a little deeper into the words of Holmes by giving you a few quotes from the Science of Mind textbook. The first, from page 98, says, "The universe has been called the Great Trinity, or triune unity of spirit, soul, and body. The body being the result, the effect, the objectification of spirit." He goes on to add on this page, "The word body, as used in the Science of Mind, means all objective manifestations of the invisible, principle of life. The body is distinguished from the idea, in that the body is seen while the idea is invisible. The physical universe is the body of God, the invisible principle of all life. Our physical being is the body of the unseen man. Behind the objective form of the rose is the idea that projects the rose. Body is always an effect, never a cause. Body expresses intelligence, its apparent intelligence being lent by the consciousness which permeates it. We would not say that consciousness is in the body, but rather that body is in consciousness." Now, I have to admit that those who are new to the works of Holmes will find his writing somewhat difficult to understand at first until you have read him for a good while. But I do want to stress that what Holmes is getting at here is that although we are moving through an experience of the body is really an effect of our consciousness. It's a projection or an outward expression of our state of consciousness. So in a sense, we're experiencing and moving through a state of the body, or the expression of the body of God and the body of us as individuals in this world of form, but what's really real behind it is the thoughts and consciousness. That consciousness is not in the body, but that the body is in this flow of consciousness, which is in the world of non-form. Here's another quote to go along with that from page 101. "Form is real as form, but is not self-conscious. It is subjective to the power that created it. Forms come and go, but the power back of them is changeless. Form is temporary, but mind is eternal." And what he's making a distinction there is that although form is real as form, it's not the ultimate reality. It's just a reality in the physical, but the ultimate reality is in the consciousness, or the mind behind it. Finally, one more quote from Holmes. This is from page 68. "The deep thinkers of antiquity, as well as the philosophers of all ages, have meditated long and earnestly upon the nature of the divine being. Knowing that there could be but one ultimate reality back of all things, they have pondered deeply as to the nature of that reality. And it is significant that most of the great thinkers have arrived at the same conclusions. The argument has been something about after this manner. The ultimate cause back of all things must be one, since life cannot be divided against itself. The infinite must be one, for there could not be two infinite beings. Whatever change takes place must take place within this one. But this one must be changeless. For being one and only, it could not change into anything but itself. All seeming change is merely the play of life upon itself, and all that happens must happen by and through some interaction upon itself. What could be the nature of this interaction? It could not be physical as we understand physics, but would have to be by the power of some inner movement of life, i.e. the voice of God, God standing for the first great and only cause of all that is. As I've come to read and interpret Holmes, what he wants us to see is that, yes, we're having these physical world experiences, but what's really real, the ultimate reality behind this reality of form is real as form, but it's not ultimate reality. Behind that is consciousness. Behind that is thought. Behind that is the power of God. That the ultimate reality is in the world of the non-form, and that this form life through which we're moving and is that persistent illusion that's in our faces every day is simply an experience. It's a projection of our thoughts, and it's a playground for us to move through. But we're ultimately spiritual beings. So we've covered three different thought systems. The words of Thomas Hora, A Course in Miracles, and Science of Mind, just to taste upon some of the words of what these different thought systems say regarding what's really real. Now, obviously, I'm pointing in a direction that the world of the non-material is the ultimate reality. And I really truly feel that for most people on a developmental path, at some point, this becomes the mindset. But you have to get there for yourself. So even though I'm presenting this as what's really real, I want you to make up your own mind. I want you to pursue your own life and your own experiences and determine for yourself what's really real. What's important in this moment is to ask the question and to pursue it and to truly think about it in every aspect of your being. Buddhism speaks of the Four Noble Truths as their beginning tenets. One of those truths is that the world is about suffering, and that suffering is due to attachment, but that there is a path out of suffering, and that path is a course of development that leads us into right action in the world and right development of the world of our consciousness. You know, as I often say here, we're spiritual beings having a material existence, that we live with one foot in two worlds simultaneously. And although we have to come to our own conclusions about what's ultimately real, what's really real, is it the world of form and matter, or is it the world of the inner awareness and consciousness and our spiritual nature? You have to come to a conclusion for that yourself. I hope this video has been helpful along those lines, but I want you to know that even if you ultimately know that what's really real is the world of the non-physical, that doesn't mean you immediately leave this planet. You still navigate through the world of form, and you still have to have that one foot as this human being in this experience. Hence, we need to develop our personal tools that will allow us to develop both our spiritual nature and our worldly experience nature simultaneously. As we said in some of the other videos, as we approach a spiritual path, we become into it from a sense of victimhood, seeing that life out there is doing things to us. But it's somewhere along the way we begin to recognize that we have some degree of control through our thoughts, words, and deeds. And we move from a state of the life being done to us than a life being done by us, that we have this ability of control. But ultimately, we continue to develop and grow and recognize that life is being lived through us, that there is this divine flow of energy that allows the world of form to be created as a automatic process of our lives. But ultimately, we begin to realize that life is done as us, that what we are seeing out in the world of form and this projection of our consciousness is an aspect of us as well, that there is no difference, there is no break between the two. What's ultimately real? In my opinion, it's the world of the non-material. But that doesn't lessen our role in the world of the material. It gives us a guidepost or information to help us navigate along and not take things out here so seriously, to let go of our attachments to the world of form and to see it as a joyous playground for us to express ourselves, our unique abilities and talents, and to have fun and joy. Ultimately, life is all about love. Love and growing in the power of love and our interconnectedness to every other aspect of ourselves that's being projected out here. Everything that we know, feel, and sense, everything that we experience, is a greater sense of oneness. It's part of that one. And when we can let go of the sense of separation and divisiveness and seeing ourselves as separate and seeing this world out here as being separate, as long as we can move to a place where we see that total interconnectedness, then we're going to be living in joy and love and harmony and peace. So in any case, what's really real? You need to decide for yourself what's really real. I hope this video has been beneficial and given you some food for thought along that path. Thanks for watching. Till next time. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. There's a similar video right here next to my face if you want to click on it. Also, if you want to get notifications of future videos, be sure to hit that subscribe button on the bottom left-hand corner. If you'd like to contact me, email me at the address on the screen or drop me a comment in the comment field below on YouTube. Thanks.